Mongoose 2, interrogative. Are you still assigned to Overwatch activities in MSR Bravo? Over.
Disciple 1, Mongoose 2. That's affirmative. However, we're checking out some activity west of that zone. Break. Got a section...
A critical retrospective. Wasteland 2, Director's Cut. Waste poisoning. A love letter written in sand and spite. Or how a scrappy Kickstarter darling gave us the Fallout sequel we begged for and then proceeded to trip over its own bootlaces in the desert. A survivor's field journal. These are my thoughts and journey. Welcome to the Wasteland. Leave your expectations at the door. Picture this. You're a Fallout veteran, not a Fallout 3 tourist, not a New Vegas wanderer. I'm talking Fallout 1 and 2, the kind of player who remembers waiting for their character to reload a shotgun in turn-based combat while silently questioning their life choices. You've lived that life. You've scraped up bottle caps in the boneyard, accidentally committed war crimes in the den, and wept when Black Isle Studios was shuttered like a post-apocalyptic Radio Shack. Then, almost miraculously, a man named Brian Fargo, the original creator of the very first Wasteland back in 1988, shows up on Kickstarter in 2012 holding a hat and saying, "Give me $900,000 and I'll build you a proper old-school post-apocalyptic RPG." The internet promptly lost its collective mind. By the end of the campaign, In Exile Entertainment walked away with nearly $3 million, over 3 times the original ask. People were hungry, honey, starving even. Did I back it? No, absolutely not, because I've watched too many Kickstarter campaigns disappear faster than clean water in the Mojave. Projects vaporize, developers ride off into the horizon on a horse made of backer money, and by law, you're just standing there with nothing but a tote bag and a broken dream. I let other people roll those dice. I waited, and when Wasteland 2 Director's Cut finally landed in 2015, polished up from the original 2014 release, I walked in, eyes open, high hopes in one hand, Google in the other. This is not a review. This is a survivor's account, a love letter wrapped in barbed wire, mailed to every OG Fallout fan still hunting for that itch that never got really scratched. Strap in. 01, standing on the shoulders of irradiated giants. Let's set the table before we flip it. The isometric, turn-based post-apocalyptic CRPG is a genre that Wasteland 1 in 1988 essentially fathered, and then watched its own child eclipse it entirely when Fallout arrived in 1997. Fallout didn't just inherit the Wasteland, it renovated the property, put in wood floors, and charged rent. It gave us special stats, a karma system, genuine moral ambiguity, and the freedom to be the kind of absolute goblin that the post-apocalypse was basically invented for. Then came Fallout 2 in 1998. Bigger, weirder, meaner. A game that let you become a porn star, sell your companions into slavery, and still somehow save the world. The bar was not just high, it was floating in orbit. Fast forward to 2014, Divinity Original Sin drops and shows the world that the CRPG wasn't dead, just napping. Around the same time, Wasteland 2 arrives, waving its lineage like a birth certificate at a family reunion. The genre was experiencing a genuine renaissance, Pillars of Eternity, Torment, Tides of Numenera, and later Pathfinder, Kingmaker would all follow, and there was absolutely an audience for exactly what In Exile Entertainment was selling. So how does Wasteland 2 stack up? It stands above the crowd in atmosphere, at least for the first 4 hours before the flatline. It beats many contemporaries in raw scope and ambition, but measured against Fallout 1 and 2, against Divinity OS's environmental interactivity and systemic combat, against Fallout's karma and genuine consequence architecture, and perhaps most urgently, Planescape Torment's gift for making NPCs feel like real, distinct human beings, rather than what we actually got, which we'll get to shortly. Wasteland 2 is essentially a love letter to Fallout 1 and 2, with perhaps one major exception. In Fallout, you could be a rat-faced scoundrel of breathtaking moral flexibility. In Wasteland 2, you are a ranger. You do good, you serve, and that toothless moral leash is this scorpion's missing sting. What Fallout understood that Wasteland 2 only half grasps is that freedom is not just a feature, it's the point. The ability to be selfish, cruel, hilarious, or righteous. The karma system that made your choices feel like they had a soul. Wasteland 2 strips this out entirely. There is no karma. There is no go rogue and become a wasteland warlord option. You are a desert ranger, full stop, with a moral compass so magnetized it practically points itself. Fallout gave you a wasteland to inhabit. Wasteland 2 gives you a mission. The difference is the size of the cage. What Wasteland 2 had that could have been borrowed more aggressively from its competition: Divinity OS's environmental interactivity and systemic combat, Fallout's karma and genuine consequence architecture, and perhaps most urgently, Planescape Torment's gift for making NPCs feel like real, distinct human beings, rather than what we actually got, which we'll get to shortly. O2. The Portrait Hall of Shame, an NPC problem of biblical proportions. Let's talk about the NPCs. Every character in Wasteland 2 has three things working against them simultaneously: a portrait, a 3D model, and a written description. In a perfect world, these three elements collaborate like a jazz trio, each one reinforcing the others, building something greater than its parts. In Wasteland 2, they argue like three roommates who've never met, each insisting the other two are lying. The portrait says one thing, the 3D model looks like a different person entirely. The description describes a third human being that neither image has seen. It's an identity crisis wearing a duster jacket. And then you discover that a significant number of these characters are sharing faces. 20 NPCs, maybe 3 portraits rotating between them. It's like the game was populated by a small town that all somehow has the same cousin. Why does the waitress in Hollywood have a portrait that suggests she's gearing up to breach a fortified compound? She's serving food, not clearing a room. Her look in the eyes says, "I have buried men in this desert and I will do it again." Ma'am, I just ordered the iguana bits. This matters more than it sounds like it should. In an RPG where dialogue and character interaction are the load-bearing walls of your entire experience, the faces of the people you meet are the game's handshake. When those faces are recycled like a post-apocalyptic library's limited magazine collection, the world shrinks. It stops feeling like a civilization struggling to survive and starts feeling like a budget production where the costume department ran out of ideas after the third character. This is a place where Fallout 2's detailed, hand-painted portraits, modest by modern standards but uniquely expressive, genuinely did more with less. Every talking head had a personality baked into their face. In Wasteland 2, you've got warriors cosplaying as waitresses, and waitresses looking like they could headshot you from 400 yards. The portraits don't whisper character, they shout confusion.
03. $3 million in a dream. The Kickstarter miracle that showed its seams. Here's the thing about Kickstarter game funding that nobody in the hype train mentions loudly enough. $3 million sounds like a lot until you remember what it actually costs to make a game. AAA studios burn through that in a week. For InXile, it was a lifeline, miraculous, community-powered, but a lifeline stretched extremely thin across an enormous, ambitious canvas. And you can feel that thinness. It seeps through the walls. The recycled portraits aren't laziness, they're budget. The limited voice acting isn't an artistic choice, it's a constraint. The systems that feel stringed together rather than cohesive aren't a design philosophy. They're the consequence of trying to build a sprawling CRPG without the resources that a sprawling CRPG demands.
This does not excuse the result, but it contextualizes it. When players say the game feels under-budgeted and that their imagination will be doing a lot of heavy lifting, they are identifying the exact crack in the foundation that Kickstarter's model created. The ambition was full-sized, the wallet was not. Something had to give, and across Wasteland 2, many things gave simultaneously in directions you couldn't predict. The irony is that the community's generosity, the raw faith that old-school RPG fans poured into this project, is precisely what made the gaps sting harder. Nobody's disappointed in a game they had zero expectations for. The Kickstarter created a debt of expectation that $3 million and an enormous amount of genuine effort simply couldn't fully repay. 04. The plot, the pain, and the phantom of logic. The Rangers and the Cage. From the first moments, Wasteland 2 puts on its collar and hands you the leash. You are a desert ranger. You will be a desert ranger. If you kill Snake Vargas for any reason, including reasons the Wasteland would consider completely reasonable, the game doesn't punish you dramatically or pivot interestingly. It just stops. You cannot level up. The plot becomes impassable. The game, quietly and without dignity, folds its arms and refuses to continue. This is not storytelling. This is a corridor with a sign that says corridor and a lock on the exit. The beauty of the Fallout lineage was always the illusion of a world that existed beyond your choices, the feeling that history was happening around you and you were merely one actor in it. Wasteland 2's world mostly waits for you to push the right button. The AG Center versus High Pool, Sophie's choice in the sand. Genuinely one of the game's finest moments and one of its most instructive design decisions. You arrive in Arizona. The radio crackles with two simultaneous disasters. High Pool is under attack, and AG Center is descending into biological chaos. You can only go to one. The other burns. Help arrives for neither. This is Wasteland 2 at its best, a genuine, gut-twisting dilemma with no clean hands. Water versus food, strategic security versus agricultural research. And the game does something magnificent. It makes you feel the weight of the choice you didn't make. The radio transmission from whichever settlement you abandoned is brutal, a kind of quiet brutality that quality RPGs earn and lesser ones only gesture at. High Pool is arguably the correct tactical choice. Water security, territorial buffer, strategic position. But correct doesn't mean comfortable. The AG Center had people in it, researchers, farmers, hope in vegetable form. The game did a good job making you carry that, and it didn't let you put it down. And then it spent the rest of the game not quite reaching those heights again. The Citadel falls, and Vargas has opinions about it. Coming home to find the Citadel destroyed after days of grinding through the Wasteland is a gut punch of the First Order. Genuinely heartbreaking, real emotional weight, the kind of moment that reminds you why this genre exists, to make you feel things about fictional places and fictional people as if they were real. And then Vargas opens his mouth, and he has the audacity, the unmitigated desert-dusted nerve to suggest that you should have stopped this from happening, that the Rangers are somehow at fault. From Los Angeles, where you were, doing his job, at his request. Vargas, with all due respect, you are standing in the rubble of a base that was destroyed on your watch, blaming the field team that was following your orders, and somehow your teeth remain in your head. This is a miracle of restraint on my part. The twist of having Vargas join your team afterward is actually a good surprise, a piece of character development that lands, but it does not erase the preceding audacity. Cochise takes the wheel, the villain twist done right. Say what you will about the game's narrative unevenness, but the moment Cochise AI takes over Matthias's body is the kind of payoff that justifies the journey. Matthias thought he was ascending to godhood. He thought he was the one doing the manipulating.
He was the puppet that didn't know it was on strings. Cochise pulling back the curtain and essentially saying, "Cute plan, mine now," is precisely the kind of villain move that makes you sit up in your chair, the cherry on a sundae that frankly needed more cherries throughout. The two factions that were always one. Late in the game, you discover that two factions you've been tracking are actually the same organization. They announce this twist with theatrical confidence. The problem is, both factions have been using highly advanced technology that nobody else in this entire game possesses. So, if you've been paying even modest attention, you've already lumped them together mentally. The reveal lands like a spoiler of a mystery you'd already solved. It's a returning villain situation that needed more groundwork. Dugan is another example, a character whose introduction feels like you should know him, like there's a history between you that the game forgot to establish. That gap between implication and execution is a thread that runs through the Wasteland 2 narrative like sand in a boot. 05. The combat system. A round of applause, then several rounds of confusion. Combat is the engine you run for the majority of the game. In an RPG, that engine had better be well-tuned. In Wasteland 2, it is a vehicle held together by good intentions and some very questionable rivets. The probability betrayal. Miss 3 shots in a row with an 80% chance to hit. Watch the enemy, operating on what appears to be pure video game malice, connect a single shot that drops your character. This is not bad luck. When it happens again and again in the same session, it is bad math wearing the costume of bad luck. The chance system in Wasteland 2 is not a probability system in any meaningful sense. It is a mood, and sometimes the game is in a very bad mood. Cover, the cactus paradox. Solid concrete walls, questionable cover. Immovable mountain faces, modest cover at best. A knee-high cactus in the middle of open desert, impenetrable fortress. You will lose gunfights to men hiding behind shrubbery. You will take fire through what your eyes are reporting as solid rock. The physics of Wasteland 2's combat environment appear to operate on vibes and spite. Stranger still, you can sometimes get a bonus to hit from the enemy's side of the cactus. The cactus doesn't care about your sides. The cactus is neutral. The cactus is in fact the most balanced character in the game. You cannot run. This is not a metaphor. The game does not allow you to flee combat, not strategic retreat, not withdraw and reconsider, not run. If you engage a pair of stationary gun turrets, your party of 5 living, breathing, theoretically autonomous humans must resolve that conflict to its violent conclusion or die trying, because the developers decided that scripting an escape option was too complicated. 5 people cannot outrun 2 turrets bolted to the ground. The immersion shatters. The wasteland laughs. Weapon balance. The shotgun question. Shotguns in Wasteland 2 exist in a state of aggressive inconvenience. High AP cost, low damage relative to alternatives, friendly fire risk. They occupy a tactical niche that never quite materializes, a weapon designed for a game that is slightly different from the one that shipped. Several weapon categories feel similarly half-baked, as if the design doc described a richer, more complex combat ecosystem that the budget and timeline quietly dismantled.
06. The illusion of choice and the reality of the hive mind. Dialogue in Wasteland 2 is handled by your party as a collective. You are not a character. You are a committee, a single-minded, legally unified entity that speaks with one voice regardless of who's standing at the front. Your thief, your soldier, your intellectual, they all say the same thing because the game doesn't track which of them is talking. It just checks your party's collective skill list and grants access accordingly. The result is a role-play experience that feels like trying to have a personality on behalf of a corporation. You are Company Inc. Your choices are those of an organization, not a person. The delicious, poisonous individual agency that made Fallout's role-playing sing, the ability to be specifically you, with your specific skills and your specific moral disasters, is replaced by a group project where everyone gets the same grade. You'll find dialogue options locked behind skill checks, but you can just cycle to whichever party member has them, regardless of whether they were the one speaking. Your combat medic can suddenly become the master negotiator mid-conversation. Your party doesn't have a voice, it has a switchboard. The decisions the game offers frequently provide only the illusion of freedom. The real choices are fewer than they appear. The game will critique and punish your selections, whichever ones you make, which eventually produces a kind of decision fatigue, where you stop feeling like a protagonist and start feeling like a variable in someone else's equation. And then there are the hidden timers on quests, the ones nobody tells you about, the ones you discover only when a settlement is already dead and the quest has already failed, and you are reading about it quietly on Google. Which brings us to the game's relationship with its own information. The quest log is basic. The world is not hand-holding. Many times, progress requires external consultation, a guide, a forum post, the accumulated suffering of the players who went before you. Some will call this old-school design. I call it a document that forgot to include the table of contents. 7. Atmosphere. 4 hours of brilliance, followed by a long walk through beige. The first 4 hours of Wasteland 2 are genuinely special. The Arizona wasteland breathes. Characters die and you feel something. The weight of choices made early, High Pool versus AG Center, hangs in the air like irradiated dust. The game earns your investment. For a brief, luminous window, it feels like the game it was always supposed to be. And then the flatline. Los Angeles arrives, and the atmosphere, that careful, crafted, earned atmosphere, dissipates like morning fog over a nuclear crater. The game becomes a checklist. Maps are linear corridors with enemies placed at intervals. Quests are fetch missions wearing different hats. The sense that your choices matter, which felt so alive in Arizona, quietly packs its things and moves on without leaving a forwarding address. The tone wobbles too. Wasteland 2 cannot fully decide what it wants to be. It's trying to thread a needle between grim post-apocalyptic military seriousness and wacky 80s road warrior absurdity, and the scene shows. Future punk aesthetics on the good guys, pop culture non sequiturs dropped into genuinely dark moments, a sense that the writers were having two different conversations in the same room and occasionally shouting over each other. There is also, frankly, too much game. The runtime could be tightened by half and lose little of substance. When exploration means watching your party slowly traverse enormous maps littered with generic encounters, the pacing does not invite contemplation. It invites the Alt F4 button and a moment of quiet reflection about your hobbies. 8. The ending that earned it, and the sequel that forgot. Against all probability, the ending of Wasteland 2 works. The slideshow of consequences, every choice reflected back at you in the final accounting, is the game at its most Fallout faithful. It's the payoff that the genre promises and too rarely delivers fully. Choices made hours ago, in passing, with no understanding of their weight, they surface, they matter. The game, in its final moments, justifies itself. It is genuinely heartbreaking that none of this carries into Wasteland 3. No save import, no consequence transfer. Team November, a new squad, a new story, a passing reference to the events you shaped, as if the developers decided your Ranger's journey was a rough draft and filed it accordingly. I understand the reasoning. Wasteland 3 needed to be accessible to newcomers, but accessibility and continuity do not have to be enemies. A legacy system, even a cosmetic one, an acknowledgement that you specifically made these specific choices, would have rewarded the players who earned that ending.
Instead, you walk into Wasteland 3 as a stranger to your own history. The rangers you built, the world you shaped, the ending you earned, filed under lore and left on a shelf. The absence of a save import is the game's quietest betrayal. Not loud enough to be a scandal, but present enough to sting every time you remember it was once something games did and could do again. And not even an achievement for completing the game on its hardest difficulty, not one digital certificate of survival. In a game that demands this much suffering from its players, the least the developers could offer is a small irradiated trophy and a note that says, "We see you." 9. Final Reckoning. The verdict from the Wasteland. Wasteland 2 Director's Cut is not a masterpiece. It is not the Fallout 3 that the original Fallout deserved, though it is sometimes, briefly, tantalizingly close. It is a game that burns brightest at its beginning and its end, with a long, uneven middle that tests the patience and rewards the stubborn. It is underbudgeted, underpolished, narratively uneven, mechanically rough in several corners, and philosophically hobbled by its refusal to let you be anything other than a dutiful public servant in a world that practically screams for moral complexity. It does not allow you to flee combat. It does not give 20 NPCs 20 faces. It does not tell you about the hidden timers until it is far, far too late. And yet, when it works, when the high pool radio crackles with consequence, when Cochise steps out from behind the curtain, when the final slideshow tallies your choices and you realize you shaped something, it works in a way that almost nothing else in its genre does. It is immersive in the way that only games made by people who genuinely care about something can be. It feels like a love letter because it is a love letter, written in sand and dried blood, addressed to every player who finished Fallout 1 and 2 years ago and still hasn't fully left the Wasteland. For OG fans, for the faithful, it's essential. Not perfect, essential. There's a difference, and the Wasteland has always understood it. Final verdict, 6 out of 10. Irradiated with potential, unevenly detonated.
Bonus talking points. 01. The party inventory problem. Finding the item you need for a quest means opening 7 individual inventories and scanning through mountains of undescriptive junk. This is not gameplay, it's archaeology without the wonder. 02. Returning villains. Continuity done mostly right. Cochise AI as the overarching threat is a genuinely strong through line from the original. The Night Terror's return in Darwin Village is a wonderful piece of lore candy for series veterans. Bobby, implied as the grown RSM commander, is the kind of background detail that rewards the faithful. More of this, please. 03. The skill check absurdity. Maxed out lockpicking. The character can open the locks of God himself, and you're still looking at 30% success on a chest. The RNG system doesn't respect your character build. It barely respects the laws of probability. A maxed skill should not mean you might succeed. 04. Voice acting, a tale of 2 tiers. The ambient voice acting, the comms traffic, background NPCs, radio transmissions, is often excellent and atmospheric. The principal characters, like Vargas, frequently sound like they were recorded in a quiet Tuesday and left there. The gap is noticeable and slightly embarrassing. 05. The 80s Road Warrior Future Punk problem. The aesthetic choices go heavy on Road Warrior Future Punk for the good guys, which raises genuine questions about the world's internal logic. Does it make sense that the moral authorities of this wasteland look like they're cosplaying a Mad Max sequel? It's a vibe, but it's not always a coherent one. 06. The map traversal tax. Watching your party slowly jog across enormous, mostly empty maps is a time cost the game levies without apology.
Half the playtime could be reclaimed simply by tightening the geography. A smaller, denser world would have served this game better than a large, sparse one. 07. The Dugan Mystery, a missed opportunity. Meeting Dugan with the implication of prior history, feeling like you've encountered his human form before he became synthetic, is a narrative loose thread that could have been something extraordinary. A returning character from Wasteland 1 seeking revenge? A ghost of the Ranger's past? Instead, a mystery that Google can't fully solve either. 08. What Wasteland 2 needed from its competitors. From Fallout, a karma system and genuine moral latitude. From Divinity OS, environmental interactivity and cohesive systemic combat. From Planescape Torment, the ability to write an NPC that feels like a singular, irreplaceable human being. These weren't impossible asks, they were design choices that shaped history, and Wasteland 2 could have borrowed more freely from all of them. 09. The difficulty achievement gap. Not a single achievement for completing the hardest difficulty. The game demands sustained suffering and offers no certificate of completion. In the language of games, that's telling your players their sacrifice doesn't count. It counts. It always counted. 010. The save import that should have been. Wasteland 3, arriving with zero legacy from Wasteland 2, is the genre equivalent of writing a sequel that ignores the original. Legacy systems exist. Dragon Age did it. Mass Effect built its entire trilogy around it. There was a better path here, and INXile chose not to walk it.